welcome to Beer for Breakfast ABV. I am Danielle from Marty and Danielle in the Morning on 91X. As always, I have my beer drinking partner in crime with me, Paul Segura, brewmaster of Karl Strauss, and we are so stoked to welcome Julian from Beachwood out of Long Beach. What's up, dude?
How you doing? Cheers.
Welcome. So, the minute that Paul told me that there was a collaboration between Karl Strauss and Beachwood on the books, I said we have got to do a beer for breakfast with Julian and check out what's been going on with you guys. But this collaboration that you guys did, the Riders on the Storm IPA, dude, this is good, guys.
Thank you very much. I have to give credit where credit is due, and Paul and his team did a phenomenal job. They really pulled this off with a plum, and what a fantastically flavorful and aromatic and clean beer. So happy with this.
I'm really digging this beer a lot too. It's getting released here, I think tomorrow. Is that right? Tomorrow or the next day. So like the timing of the show.
It's the 10th, yeah.
Yeah. So we're kind of getting a sneak peek on this before anybody else really gets it.
Yeah.
And by the way, Danielle, I'm not sure if you kind of noticed, but the bottom of my can has this little kind of a Julian code on it. But Julian's can has something a little different on it.
Oh, what does it have? Let's see here. Let's see if we can.
It says Julian on it.
I know. Look at those guys. What a bunch of sweethearts! Really, that was so nice of them to do that.
So his
made me feel extra special.
His also has a Julian code on it, but it's slightly different.
It's a different Julian code. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. That was fun. My ego loved it.
This whole brew was a complete treat for me personally and for everybody else at Karl Strauss. Julian, aside from being an extremely good-looking guy, and his boyish charisma that he has as well is known throughout the industry for being an exceptional brewer, and has won lots of international awards for his brewing prowess. So it was a huge treat for us as a company to brew with Beachwood. The whole crew up there, and he came to like San Diego twice, once to brew the beer, once, when it was packaged, and then to kick my ass on Cowles Mountain.
I don't know about that, but we had a really good time all around doing this. In fact, I think we got together in person four separate times for the pilot batch. The for real batch at production, the can release, and then also you and your team came to Beachwood, our original brew pub location in Long Beach, to let us taste the pilot batches, and they were fantastic. It really, the honor is ours, and Karl Strauss is an industry leader, has been for a long time. For you guys are celebrating your 32nd anniversary this year. What a milestone. Wow. And to think, the whole time that I've been drinking Karl Strauss beer, and to see how the company has evolved and continue to grow and reinvent itself, it's amazing. You have not stood still, and I mean that in the best sense.
We're ADHD, I think, a little bit here. You have roots here in San Diego. You have done some brewing down here, and some of the people that you hang with down here are some of the best in the industry here in San Diego as well. The likes of, Jeff Bagby and Tommy Arthur and Tom Nickel.
For sure. Love all those guys to death. And were it not for all three of them, I don't think I would be brewing professionally. And to kind of give a little bit of history, I moved to Southern California in 2003. And I was a very kind of light hobbyist of a home brewer at the time. But when I moved down here, I was lonely, single, bored, and I had an apartment to myself. So I decided to get back into home brewing. It was one of those things where I brought it to a party and a friend said, "Oh, dude, you should sell this stuff." And I started taking it more seriously. But right about that time, I also started going to San Diego And this is when, this is actually even before Bagby brewed at Pizza Port Carlsbad when he was still at OG's. Tommy was at Solana Beach. Tom Nickel, I think, had right around that time had purchased O'Brien's. But I was able to form these friendships and personal relationships with these guys, and they mentored me. They were open books in terms of processes, procedures, invited me to come hang out with them. I would share my home brews with them, and I had the honor and good fortune of being able to brew some of my homebrew recipes at places like Pizza Port when I was still a homebrewer. It was crazy. So that's kind of how I led myself into professional brewing. And I owe all three of those people that you mentioned a debt of gratitude for that.
Well, you have not.
So cool.
You have not stood still either. You have not rested. You continue to push the envelope in all sorts of different ways. Ways that I'm not going to say on camera right now, but because Julian shares a lot of successes and failures, the same as the three guys that we spoke about, and that's what's really cool about the beer industry, just kind of in general, is that we share successes and failures, and we have that rising boat mentality, where and that's rad. Julian's no different in that respect than but perhaps even more so. He will taste other people's beers and say, hey man, I get this or that or whatever, and maybe suggest ways to improve those beers, or mention maybe or shit. There have been times where people come to him and say, how do you get those flavors in your beer? And he's like free flowing with the information. So kudos to that. He's also given back to the industry in all sorts of different ways by judging and, giving talks and stuff like that too. So kudos to you and your ethos.
Thank
and
you.
Everything that you've kind of contributed to the brewing industry. I do have a question for Danielle regarding this beer.
Yes.
Danielle, are you getting the same amount of blueberry flavoring that Julian and I get when you taste this?
So by you saying that, I assume that means that there's mosaic hops in this beer, because this is a long-running joke that I don't get blueberry. So here is my question to you. Maybe this is a way that you two can educate me. What does a blueberry taste like? What are the notes of a blueberry that I should be getting through this beer?
Okay, so here's the thing with flavors and aromas, and almost anything in life is we express our understanding of these things through metaphors. X is like Y. Y is like Z. Well, what is Z like? Well, it's like Y. So there's a lot of relativism here and a lot of metaphors that we draw on. But a blueberry is a pretty fundamental flavor. It's like if somebody asked you, what does an orange taste like? Oh, that's a pretty fundamental flavor. However, there are certain, if you want to go get yourself kind of one of those giant Costco size or Otis Spunkmeyer blueberry muffins, where you taste an exaggerated amount of blueberry because they make those things with blueberry and blueberry extract and flavoring. When you get an exaggerated amount of that flavor, you'll start tasting it in certain mosaic beers, certainly this one. There are other foods out there like natural processed coffee, which I find to have a huge blueberry component, which is we use a natural processed coffee in Mocha Machine. And so I actually think, Danielle, when you taste that beer, you might kind of start to see some parallel flavors. Paul's got Mocha Machine. Nice. Good on you. So I think if you taste flavors in an exaggerated form, you can taste them in more subtle instances.
Julian, I have this question to soda brewers, and that's the answer that I've gotten. Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
You're way more polite than me. I would have just said blueberries taste like blueberries, man.
And it's what he said numerous times. Before we get into Mocha Machine, I do want to know, when it came to Riders on the Storm IPA, I mean, what were you like, you go, or you get into the room together and you're like, we're making a beer together. What were you going for?
Well, one of my favorite Karl Strauss beers, well, two of my favorite Karl Strauss beers are Aurora Hoppy Alice and then Mosaic Session. Both beers have varying amounts of mosaic in them. And then Paul said one of his favorite Beachwood beers is Amalgamator.
That's an
So
excellent beer.
thank you. An Amalgamator is our mosaic forward year-round core, always available. That's my plug. West Coast IPA. And this beer is entirely dry hopped with our select mosaic, which has lots of blueberry in it. And Paul and I decided, you know what, people are going to want an IPA from us. Why don't we kind of mash up Aurora Hoppy Alice, which is your GABF award-winning IPA, and Amalgamator, because they're both, you know, one has more mosaic than the other, but it seemed like a natural kind of combination. So we blended the sensibilities and kind of structure of both of those beers. And it was cool because we kind of imported some unique aspects of Beachwood IPAs and specifically Amalgamator in terms of the specialty malt that we use and kind of the water treatment. We brought those over to the Riders on the Storm, and it's really cool. I feel like I taste a Beachwood and Karl Strauss beer at the same time.
There were a couple little tricks that I learned during this brew, particularly with the water treatment, that sort of makes the beer sort of brighter. Like you can taste the nuances a little bit more, and just slightly fresher as well. So I'm grateful to have having learned a little bit in the process of having brewed with Julian. I'm enjoying this beer a lot. It's very thirst quenching. It's 7.1% ABV, but it's nice and dry and very hop forward, and especially mosaic forward. It does have a little bit of Amarillo in there as well, which kind of gives it a little bit more citrus-like flavor and aroma than than the mosaic would have done by itself.
And it wouldn't be a San Diego brewed IPA if it didn't have Amarillo in it, right?
Yeah. A lot of the better IPAs from San Diego had Amarillo.
Well,
For
this
sure.
beer
One of my
comes out
favorites
this
in
week.
particular.
Don't sleep on getting this beer because I feel privileged that I got to taste it before the rest of the people got to taste it.
Yay.
I feel kind of
sure.
that we're actually having this or featuring this when we've got Julian on the show, because Beachwood has such a great lexicon of excellent beers, a lot of award winners in there. So I'd like to maybe try to get Julian back before too long when it's not a collab, where we can just feature some of the excellent other beers that Beachwood has.
Well, let's
I'd love
transition to a Beachwood beer. Let's pop the Mocha Machine.
Let's do Mocha Machine. Okay, do it.
This is another award winner, no?
Yes. We're really proud of Mocha Machine. That's a beer that we've been brewing for about 8 years now. And it's gone through some kind of, subtle tweaks over the years in our kind of interminable quest to achieve the perfect beer, which is always just ahead of us with whatever we're doing. But Mocha Machine is one of our most award-winning beers, and pomposity aside, I think it's the most award-winning coffee beer in the world. It stands on 3 World Beer Cup medals and 2 GABF medals, and that beer is actually medaled with coffee from 3 different continents over the years. So origin is not necessarily as important as the fact that Portola Coffee Roasters does our coffee when they're phenomenal. But we always pick a natural processed bean, and that really defines the core coffee aspects of that beer. So
this is so good.
Thank
It
you.
hasn't even touched my lips yet, but the coffee aroma coming off of it is so thick you can cut it with a knife.
It's pretty huge, and we use a lot of coffee in that. We use for kind of the number nerds out there, we use 3 pounds per barrel, so it gets a really, really hefty dose. So basically every keg of beer has 1.5 pounds of coffee in it, so a lot of coffee. And we infuse that coffee. Basically, it gets roasted, it gets rested just the minimum amount of time necessary, and then it gets ground and it immediately goes in the beer. So it's really fresh. Portola is only a couple miles away from the brewery, so we're able to pick it up from them and get it right in the beer. And the beer, additionally, after it gets the coffee infusion, gets aged on cocoa nibs from Ecuador. And the particular combination of this beer, the base beer kind of, if you were to taste it on its own, tastes like actually almost more like a Doppelbock than it does an Imperial Porter, although we call it an Imperial Porter. And the coffee that we use is very fruity and has a big blueberry component. And then the cocoa nibs that we source are also fairly fruity compared to maybe cocoa nibs from, let's just say, Ghana or other parts of the world. So the Ecuador nibs that we use are pretty fruity, and you smell this beer. It's really fruity, coffee forward, cocoa. But Danielle, do you get that blueberry component in there a little bit?
I do, actually. Going from one to the other. No, I do, and I'm feeling it. Yeah, no, I get that hint of blueberry. It's Paul. I feel like we've made a full circle.
It's a breakthrough. We've done it.
A breakthrough has just happened. Amazing.
Awesome.
This is exciting. So now I wonder if Marty will taste it Friday morning when we do beer for breakfast. When we go from Riders on the Storm into Mocha Machine.
I'm anxious to hear Marty's comments on this when we all taste it together on the radio. So I'm looking at this beer. So okay, you mentioned a couple things I want to follow up on. So you said it's probably the most award-winning coffee beer, but I think like GABF and World Beer Cup differentiate coffee beer and coffee stout. So I'm guessing this is one in the coffee stout category.
It's actually technically medaled in both because they spun off that category, I believe, in 2017, I think it was. It was a couple of years ago. So it used to be that there was one kind of general umbrella for anything that had coffee added to it, and it was simply coffee beer. And GABF kind of started getting two distinct groups of beer. They started getting dark beers with coffee and then kind of more experimental stuff with coffee. So they kind of split the two categories. And I think it was in let me see, what year was GABF in Nashville? Was that 2018? Yeah, it was 2018. It was in Nashville. I remember it was the year before because I judged for the coffee beer category at GABF in 2017, because that I think was the first year they spun off coffee beer, and then the other category was coffee, porter, and stout. And I was really curious to judge beers that weren't porter and stout that had coffee incorporated into them.
Okay.
So, yeah, it used to be one category. Now they're two separate categories.
So what's about Mocha Machine is that like it continues to win medals year after year. But there's a lot of breweries out there that make coffee stouts. So the competition in this category is huge. And the thing is, once a brewery has won a couple medals, 2-3 medals, like in a category, other brewers go out and they buy samples of it and they compare it against their own, and then they sort of try to reverse engineer it or make tweaks to their own so that they could win the medal in that category. But this beer seems to have a monopoly on that. Like
it's good.
It's not beatable.
It definitely is. There are some really good coffee beers that have been medaling the last couple years, and Mocha Machine, despite its past success, there have been other really amazing beers that have edged it out in the last couple. But I think if you, not just Mocha Machine, but if you go back and look at all coffee beers that have medaled at GABF and World Beer Cup in the last 10 years, look and see how many of them have been brewed with Portola coffee. My guess is that a third or more of them have been brewed with Portola coffee. And Jeff Dugan is the roaster, the roast master and owner of Portola, if you will. He's got an amazing palate, and his ability to source some of the best coffee and create insane roast profiles, especially for coffee that's going in the beer. He really knows a lot, and he's got a really kind of symbiotic relationship with a lot of breweries that he works with, and he knows how to develop roast profiles specifically for a brewery's flavor, like general kind of house flavors. But Portola coffee is awesome and reigns supreme in many competitions.
Well, I can definitely see why. The taste is absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And you hold it up to the light, and I can kind of see what you're saying about the Doppelbock. Perhaps it's not quite opaque. It's got a very deep, dark mahogany color.
Right. It's almost like a transparent, like sepia, but it's not super dark, and there's not a whole lot of roast malt in that beer. And the roast is fairly restrained. The bitterness is fairly restrained because we know we're going to get roast characteristics from the coffee. We know we're going to get bitterness from the coffee. We know we're going to get some kind of roast components, even from the cocoa nibs. So we make sure to dial that back in the base beer and kind of leave room for those additional components. Because we never treat anything as an additive. At Beachwood, we treat everything as an ingredient. So, for example, if we do a barrel-aged beer, we usually don't just take a beer that stands on its own and simply put it in a barrel. We do for some things, but most of the time we design a beer specifically to have room for that barrel, and that the barrel works as an ingredient as opposed to an additive. And Mocha Machine is that same way. The base beer is designed to have coffee, to have cocoa nibs. You might not want to drink the base beer on its own. It might seem a little kind of out of place.
Interesting. Julian, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. Like this, I love Beachwood so much, and I was really, really stoked when I was able to see that Beachwood is being carried over at Vine and Vine. That's actually where I got Mocha Machine. I saw Algometer there also. I saw a lager there. All of your great Beachwood beers are there at Vine and Vine. Shout out over there on Adams Avenue. Well done, dude. Like you're slaying it up there.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, I really can't take any credit for that. We have amazing fans out there, not just in Southern California, but in a lot of other parts of the states and even internationally. And we're really fortunate that our fans are very loyal and they seek us out. I'm grateful every day for that.
If you don't want to buy packages of his beer, it's often on tap at a few places in San Diego as well. O'Brien's, of course. Before Hamilton's had the little accident not too long ago, it was often on tap at Hamilton's as well. But you'll find it at some of the better beer bars in San Diego.
Sure.
If you want it in its more fresh, pristine. But I'm not saying at all that they do a bad job with their packaging, because I don't get any DO or anything off this. And I've had a lot of their
super fresh.
Yeah.
My team works really, really hard to package beer as best they can. I'm always proud of their A-level effort, and whether it's Mocha Machine going into cans or our lager or IPA, they always work equally hard to make sure that beer is packaged fresh for you.
Well, thank you so much, Julian, for joining us from Beachwood Brewing out of Huntington Beach and Long Beach. Friday morning, Paul will be joining myself and Marty on the morning show on 91X at 9:05 for Beer for Breakfast, and we will be drinking Beachwood Brewing. So please join us. You can find previous episodes of Beer for Breakfast at 91x.com. And let's cheers to independently owned craft beer and radio in Southern California.
Cheers.
Cheers to that.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a treat and always good to see both of you.